I want to thank everybody for joining the Forescout event today. Before we get started, I wanted to just thank Forescout for joining us today and putting on this event. Set Solutions and Forescout have been partners for quite a few years now, and we've used them to tackle some very big cybersecurity issues during that partnership. So we're excited to have Forescout show kind of the approaching new technology around Forrester's zero trust concepts. And we look forward to kind of, seeing exactly how they conquer zero trust and how the visibility that they give our customers today as well. Before we get started, I wanted to remind everyone that this is not a lunch and learn. This is a charity event, and depending on what you've selected when you signed up, you'll either be receiving a gift card or you can use the donation, and you'll get a receipt for that donation once the call is over today. Also, just a quick housekeeping on question and answers. Please do not use the chat. There'll be a button at the bottom that says Q&A, and the Q&A will allow you to ask questions during the event, and those will be able to be recorded, and thus we'll be able to follow up with those questions and answers after the event is over. If we see something that's relevant to the topics as we're going along, we'll definitely point those out, and we'll make sure that we get those answered after the event or during the event, whichever the case may be. Also, from a follow-up perspective, I wanted to let everyone know that after the event, we will be sending out a questionnaire. We will pick randomly from the responders, and they will receive a gift pack, and that gift pack will include a Peter Millar golf shirt. So thank you, Forescout, for giving us that as well. With that being said, we're going to turn it over to Ted, and Ted's going to go through the charity event and kind of the content today. Thank you, Ted.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dan. Thanks for giving me that intro. Hopefully everyone's clear here. We see the graphic. Q&A is the button we want you to use here for questions. Also, as we go through the slide deck, I'm going to have a few poll questions, right? 3 polling questions where we'll check your knowledge or ability to respond to how well I'm doing to share the information here. We'll keep it nice and light, but I'm sure everyone has taken a look at zero trust in the past, and we're going to just have a conversation around how Forescout can help you enforce zero trust in your environment. So that being said, let's jump in. So our agenda, quick, short, to the point. What is zero trust? How does Forescout help with the zero trust journey in our customer environments and potentially in your environment? Also, we'll cover some key principles around zero trust, a couple different places in the slide deck. Want to make sure everybody's on the same page. And then we'll show you at the very end how to learn more. We will share this slide deck with you, as well as give you some links in the slide deck to some of the reference material. So with that being said, let's jump right in. So some of the tenets around zero trust, we see one of the many graphics that you guys have probably looked at online already about Forrester's zero trust concept here on the right. Data is at the middle of your network. You have different networks that connect to that data. We have different devices coming and going, the same for people. We have differing levels of automation and orchestration efforts that may be going on. All of that's kind of underpinned by visibility and analytics, and it kind of ties together with the workloads of the employees or of the contractors and the other people in your network, right? So what are some of these tenets that kind of tie all this together that Forrester put together under this umbrella of zero trust? Number one is we're focused on the outcomes, right? So that data that's inside your network is there for a reason. People create it. There's data and analytics about the network itself, about devices and how they connect to one another. We capture that data. We need to protect it. And the zero trust principles here will help us build a model for our network and how we can enforce zero trust in our environment. We're going to talk about that a little. So some of the other concepts here, this least privilege or need to know concept, will extend to data protection, network access control, and so forth. Also, the ability to inspect traffic in the network can be very critical when it comes to visibility, knowing what types of devices are connecting to the network, where they're going, what data they're accessing. So just kind of a general survey of some of the concepts. Now to drill down just a little bit here, so some of the core principles of the zero trust model as put forth by Forrester. You know, connecting from a particular segment is not the only determining factor for what services can be accessed, right? Their statement here can be a little misleading. I had to read it a few times to really get the gist of it, but the bottom line is that we want to know more about just the device as it connects to the network and or the user to determine what access they have, right? We want to know as much about the user as possible. We need to know as much about the device as possible, as well as the combination of the two to provide that level of access that in Forrester's model here states that it must be authorized. So authentication versus authorization, right? Authentication is what you have, basically. Authorization is who are you and what access you would have. So we'll talk more about how Forescout can help you authorize these devices to access the data. And kind of the underpinning concept here is never trust, always verify. All right. So what does it mean in the Forescout world to be able to enforce or help you build a foundation of zero trust in your network? Well, it all starts with visibility, right? So we know everything that connects to the network, 100% of devices all the time as they connect and as they live and breathe on your network, as it were, right? And that way we're able to identify the available attack surfaces, because that's what we're most concerned about, is the potential for devices and areas of the network and data to be exploited or taken advantage of or stolen in some cases from the environment. So we want to know what devices are connecting and living on the network, what users are there, what applications are running or installed, and also try to map out what workloads might be in place depending on the type of device and user, as well as where they're going on the network. So one thing that we use for that is to map the data flows, so we can look at traffic via span or via net flow on the network side, and we put together the user, device, and the app context with the network traffic. And what that does, it gives us an ability to identify and understand what's legitimate traffic by a specific device and user on the network, right? And more importantly, how to identify what may not be legitimate or anomalous. And what that helps us do is to provide the ability to build and enforce a segmentation strategy across all of your networks, your campus, your data center, your IoT, your OT networks, your cloud, in a coordinated effort that is enterprise-wide, right? So micro perimeters, because as we know, the perimeter has been extended out to the endpoint these days and into the cloud. That also extends into OT environments, which we know are traditionally kind of hands-off from a network monitoring or network access control standpoint. We can provide a no-touch approach to those OT networks so that we don't cause any disruptions to those devices that may not be as robust as some others that would be on our IT network. So that ability to do segmentation strategy across all those networks is key, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But the end goal, remember, one of the core concepts there is keep the end goal in mind, right? And the end goal is to be able to respond more quickly to events or outbreaks or malicious activity as it happens, right? So we can build policies, we can automate responses, and then we can monitor the status of the network and the responses in an ongoing fashion, okay? So a lot of concepts there. And how we do that from a Forescout standpoint, we have one consolidated platform or a single pane of glass, as it were, but we have multiple products that run within that platform. So starting on the left here, we have what we call our eyesight, and that's the ability to provide that visibility, 100% real-time, continuous visibility of all devices on the network. That visibility data feeds into our iSegment tool to give you the ability to design and implement segmentation policies that would extend to your network infrastructure, your next-gen firewalls, your cloud-based infrastructure, so that we can enforce these segmentation policies that we would simulate before we actually implement them. And then last but not least, iControl is the real teeth in the solution, right? That's what gives us the ability to perform control actions. So that if we want to control access from VPN users as they go into our IT network, for instance, we can do that with the iControl policies. All right, so that kind of brings us to sort of a summary slide here around our zero trust principles. Number one key tenet here is complete visibility, right? That's foundational to everything to do with zero trust. Forrester states that in their, in their thesis about zero trust. What that extends to is devices and users beyond just the identity of the user. So we also want to look at the context. So who is that user? Why should they have access to a specific type of network? What device are they connecting from, right? So they may have access on their laptop, or we may give them access from a laptop, but maybe not from an iPhone or from an Android, for instance, right? So the device and the user together, that creates that entity that we want to be able to control. And then sort of underpinning these concepts is this idea of segmentation, right? It's key to enforcing those policies everywhere. Again, as I stated, across all the networks that are in your environment. So that brings us to our first poll question. It's pretty straightforward. You should have the answer here, but what are some of the key principles of zero trust? And then for the answers here, is that going to be complete visibility, segmentation, identity beyond users, or all of the above? So you should see a little pop-up with the polling questions. It gives you an opportunity to actually answer these. Let's see. So, and Eileen, I am getting a notification. Host and panelists can't vote. So I'm not sure what that means.
It just means that you're not going to be voting to skew the numbers, Ted.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Well, I was going to throw an incorrect answer in there to kind of skew it downward. Okay. So then I won't answer. Okay. I won't answer. So I gave an appropriate amount of time. Good deal. We've made it through the end here. And we have 5 answers. That's 100% of our attendees here. So great job, guys. Everybody answered that one correctly, which I fully expected. We want to make sure we have a little bit of fun with this, and the payback is going to be a nice little gift at the end of it. So hang in there with me. It's going to get fun here. All right. So good job on that first poll. Now then, let's kind of peel back the layers of that visibility onion, as it were, right? So the idea here is that we want to be able to improve our ability to control devices, traffic, users, et cetera, as they connect to the network, right? So the concentric circles that we see on the left side, you guys are familiar with this. In your IT environment, notice it's green. It's green for a reason, right? We have the most amount of control there. Typically your IT environment is going to be firewalled off from the rest of the world, or at least with a DMZ. You guys probably have really good visibility of that. You know what IP addresses are there, et cetera, et cetera. You probably have agents that run on your Windows, Mac, and Linux machines. You have all of your printers and security cameras in a spreadsheet or a CMDB somewhere, so you can lay your hands on one very quickly, or the details of it. But what happens if somebody decides, oh, wait a second, I want to be able to, route traffic to a different part of the network, or I want to extend, provide Wi-Fi in an office? This concept of shadow IT, right, has crept in. And again, this is stuff that's over the last several years, probably 10 plus years that this has been happening, right? So somebody drops in a Wi-Fi router. Well, all of a sudden you have a device, a network device that is unsanctioned. It should be considered rogue, because it's a router in this case. It could bridge networks. It could do a lot of things that could cause issues with your network, network outages or users not being able to access the network. So obviously that would be considered an attack surface. You have less control. As we extend out, to the web, everyone in the environment has web access. Yeah, that means they can click on a link and fall prey to some sort of a phishing scam. Your mobile devices are huge in environments now. And especially if we're running platforms that are not as tightly controlled as others, potentially they present additional attack surfaces. That extends out to social media, other third parties that come in, or actually social engineering, I guess is probably what we mean by that social. But what that does is it presents the idea that we have decreasing levels of control as our networks are expanding, right? As I like to say, back in the good old days, right, when we just had our little IT environment, we knew we had our 4 firewalls around and we were protected. Well, guess what? Those days are long gone. We all know that, so that's why we're looking at these segmentation projects, and zero trust in particular. So one of the biggest challenges historically and today to providing a secure network computing environment is lack of consistent visibility across your different environments, right? All of us have a campus environment. Most of us have a data center. Most of us these days have a cloud, yeah. Everybody has IoT. I mean, whether we want to admit it or not, you know, we have printers. Those are considered IoT. You probably have card badge readers on your offices. Those are IoT. That extends to security cameras, temperature sensors in data centers, TVs in reception areas, you name it. All of those are IoT, or the Internet of Things. And those devices, as we're all well aware, are typically going to be less secure than our, say, standard Windows, Mac, or Linux operating system, because that lightweight Linux kernel has probably been just pushed out very quickly. It may have vulnerabilities in it. We need to keep an eye on them, right? So that consistent visibility is what we're shooting for. And then moving over to the right side into the red zone, OT, if any of you have any manufacturing facilities, you may very well not have any visibility in there, depending on the history. You know, some of our OT environments or our OT customers that we talk to, the guys that run the security practice have no clue what's out there. And they know that, right? Because they're mainly on the manufacturing floor. You've got PLCs, you have outdated equipment that you can't scan, you can't do anything with, so we just avoid them, right? So the key here to build our zero trust practice is going to be full visibility across all those environments. Whether you have all of them or you just have a couple of them, we want to provide you with that visibility with the Forescout platform. And the first step is that we're going to discover all these endpoints, right? We have over 20 intelligent, active, and passive agentless techniques. What that means is we have a number of ways to gather the operating system. We have a number of ways to gather an IP address or a MAC address, right? In a standard IT environment, so in your campus, even in your data center, we would typically utilize an active scanning technique or an active approach. Also in IoT, usually it's going to be active. But if we move over into OT, we're going to have to go passive. That means no nmaps, no remote interrogation of those endpoints, right, like we would in IT, where we have our Windows machines and our printers and so forth that are typically rather robust. In an OT environment, if we have a manufacturing line that's running on, you know, some kernel from the 80s, you know, believe it or not, it happens, right? They're still out there, the 90s maybe. It's a better decade to choose. Point being, some of those older systems we just can't touch. You know, we're not allowed to, so we need these passive techniques. And again, across the board, we can do all of this in an agentless manner. The step here, or the next step here, after we've discovered devices, we want to very accurately and very quickly classify them. So we identify what is it, you know, by operating system, IP address, user that's logged in. We want to be able to accurately classify all IT, IoT, and OT devices. So then the next step, and I apologize if you hear some background noise. I'm working from home, as we all are, and I've got the lawn guys out there today. So anyway, next step, we want to assess the posture or the hygiene of those endpoints. In a campus environment, right, we're looking at Windows, Mac, and Linux primarily, maybe printers, maybe security cameras, but we want to verify what's on that device, who's logged into it, what are the potential vulnerabilities, right, are the OS patches in place, check certain configurations, look for security agents and indications of compromise. So all of those can be accomplished in any one of these environments, but it just kind of depends on whether we have active techniques or passive. So we have over 20 of those techniques. Again, to kind of summarize that, all agentless, in real time, across all of your environments, and we are very scalable. Our largest customers have over 1 million devices under Forescout management, and we can technically scale to about 2 million currently with our current platform. All right, guys, so that leads us to polling question number 2. Let's see how good a job I did with sharing this information with you. So what is a common challenge with segmentation projects? Most of you are working on a segmentation project. Most customers that we talk to today are, so you probably already know these intimately, right? So what's one of the challenges that I pointed out, though? Would it be homogeneous devices, simplicity of multi-vendor environments, incomplete context on devices, applications, and users? So let's answer here. We had 5 answers on the last one. Let's see how many we have weighing in. Give you a minute to answer, and then we'll see our results. All right, still waiting on those results. I so want to click on one of these. This one isn't a giveaway, though. All right, so here are our results. A little bit of a mix here. So some of us were correct. We had homogeneous devices, simplicity of multi-vendor environments, incomplete context on devices was a wrong answer there, right? So we had a few that answered that. Or I'm sorry, that was the right answer. So we didn't get everybody answering the incomplete context. That was the correct answer. So good job. A couple of you were kind of thrown off by homogeneous devices and simplicity there. So just a little play on words. So there we go. Incomplete context on devices, applications, and users. So as I stated on a couple of slides, we want to know as much as we can about the devices and the users, as well as applications running on those devices as they connect to the network. So we're going to provide that for you with the Forescout platform. So we've talked a little bit about IoT. You guys are probably dealing with IoT on a daily basis, whether it's as simple or as common as your printers, your security cameras, et cetera, or it may extend into more complex environments where maybe you have very lightweight operating systems running on controllers for HVAC equipment or whatever it happens to be. The key point here is that just like our IT devices, we want to maintain a continuous asset inventory for our IoT devices. So that's part of the zero trust principles. We want to have a good solid asset inventory that also ties into our SANS top 20. If you guys are familiar with that one, the top 1 and 2 are hardware asset management and software asset management. So that extends to IoT devices as well. The great thing about the Forescout platform is not only will we be able to see in real time all of the IoT devices as they connect, we can do posture assessments on there. So if we want to confirm that a certain set of SNMP credentials work, or a long list of commonly known SNMP credentials don't work on that endpoint, we can run those posture assessments on your IoT devices. That's particularly helpful, for instance, for, say, your security cameras, right? If you'll remember the Mirai botnet, it spread due to the fact that cameras had commonly used credentials still configured on them, so that meant that they weren't being properly, they didn't fall under the proper compliance guidelines, okay? So we're, again, going to enforce no default configurations. This gives us the ability to provide effective functional micro-segmentation. So you may want to say, okay, if there's security cameras, they go into the security camera VLAN, right? We can do that on access via the segmentation component, right, with our eye control. And what this provides for us is no cross-pollination, meaning that a security camera is not living on the network with Windows systems, right, that could possibly have malicious, or have malware on them that are designed to go attack those lightweight operating systems. So we've seen everything out in the wild, right? And that gives us the ability to respond very quickly and very decisively. So if our security cameras are on the correct VLAN and our other IoT gear is on the correct VLAN and something's misbehaving, we can very quickly respond to that event. Okay, and overall, again, that gives us the ability to mitigate any types of malicious activity in a very rapid manner. All right, so this slide's a little busy, so we're going to try to get through all of it, and then we'll have another poll question here in a minute or two. So what does it really mean to build a segmentation policy? From the foundation for Forescout, it's key to be able to identify and classify all those devices. So we see down the left side a lot of the device types that would be represented in IT, in IoT, and OT, right? So you look at your utilities, energy, critical infrastructure, those are all operational technology environments. You look at healthcare. Healthcare could be a mix, but we do have healthcare OT. So with the Forescout platform, it's critical that we identify all the device types very quickly and classify them. And the way we do that is that we currently have in our device cloud over 11 million device profiles, right? So where did those come from? We built a lot of them, right, from our experience in the environment and in many, many environments. Also, they come from a crowdsourcing function that can be enabled in the Forescout deployment that's on-prem for your environment or in the cloud. and it will feed a new device that gets classified in your environment in a sanitized fashion. We're not sharing IP addresses or any, company-specific information. But if we see a new type of, projector, as we see here, or a cash machine, or a security camera, that can be fed into that device cloud. Our researchers will take a look at that and see if it is indeed a unique profile. If so, then we can publish it out via what we call our device profile library that lives on your appliance. So this happens in a very rapid manner. And then where this is so powerful is that it's based on three primary pieces of information that have multiple properties behind them, right? So we look at our function, right? So a tablet, printer, point-of-sale device, X-ray machine, whatever it is, that function is a resolved property based on as many as 10, 20, 30 different properties of that endpoint, right? By default, out of the box, the Forescout platform gathers almost 200 endpoint properties. That's a ton, right? And then as we add additional integrations or extended modules, as we call them, let's say, for instance, you guys are running McAfee EPO. If we install that plugin, we pull in another 15 different properties that we gather from that other integration. Any of those can be used in these classifications. Any and all of them can be used in classifications and properties or policies. Secondly, the operating system is critical. In order for us to resolve it's a printer, it should be running an operating system that's typical for a printer. It's a lightweight either Linux or an Android operating system, or it may be Windows 7, or maybe an embedded. So we have a multitude of combinations that we resolve for a printer, open ports not being the least of which, etc. And then also the vendor and model. So by MAC address, we can identify a lot of data about that endpoint. Is it an iPad? Is it a GE water processor, etc.? The combination of vendor and model, it gives us the ability to classify a lot of the healthcare devices we see listed here, as well as OT devices like your, device that we'd see in a power plant, ABB or Yokogawa or Panasonic, etc. So we have, again, over 11 million crowdsourced devices in our knowledge base. We utilize protocol analysis on that, or deep packet inspection, as well as other profiles or properties that we learn in the environment. And we do that in a continuous manner. All right, so micro-segmentation. Yes,
Ken,
question?
Sorry,
yes.
We did have a question come in. It's does
okay,
the continuous behavior monitoring use signatures, or is it AI related?
Kind of a mixture of both, right? So we do have signatures, again, in the crowdsourced database. So if it matches one of those profiles, we can identify, yeah, that's a Panasonic PLC or a Canon printer or whatnot. But the AI component kind of comes in where we feed that data to the cloud, and we're able to analyze that and then push out a new profile. You can also adjust the profiles that you would have running in your environment, or even create new ones that are specific to your environment. And that's where we would see a new profile that would get loaded to the cloud if you choose to opt in for that service. So that's a good question. Was there any follow-on to that, Eileen?
No, sir. And as a reminder,
okay,
if everyone could just enter your questions in the Q&A portion, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thanks, Eileen. So this concept of micro-segmentation, right? I mean, those of us that have come from a networking background, that's probably all of you on the call, right? You've had some experience with it. Segmentation typically means VLANs, ACLs, a network kind of context. Micro-segmentation then extends into other platforms. And in this case, software-defined networking or defined segmentation. We tie into several different solutions for that, ACI, NSX, and a few others. That gives us the ability to isolate these applications in a virtual environment. So going beyond your campus or your data center, we can deploy in your cloud environment, AWS, Azure, and be able to enforce at the software level in that virtual environment. Okay, so the concept of micro-segmentation is certainly coming into the forefront these days, because we're moving so much of our on-prem networks into the cloud, right? And we're seeing even more of that in the last few months, because so many of us are working from home. So many of our customers are saying, hey, how about VPN connections? We need to start protecting those. Let's move into the cloud as well, because most of my applications are in the cloud, so my users just connect directly there. So again, we can deploy in the cloud on these virtual infrastructures. And then typically we're focused mostly on east-west communication. This is part of the Forrester Zero Trust model as well, and kind of supports this concept of micro-segmentation. We're not as much worried about north-south. You have big iron firewalls to protect in most cases for that type of traffic or malicious behavior. And then being able to build your security policies and enforce them at a very granular level, right? We'll see a little bit of that through these slides. We'd certainly love to set up another call with you if you're interested, so that we can look at policies, drill down into the details about how some of this is built. We can set that up on another call. But notice also you have a link to a microsegmentation article that this data was pulled from. So out of the box, our server, our appliance is going to have basic policies that classify and have the ability to assess your devices. And then we can talk about segmentation. We'll actually look at that here in a second, but it's kind of up to you how granular you need to get on those policies. And that's where we can do a little deeper dive with you on a separate call. So if you will, take a little trip with me here, right? So most of you probably recognize this ship. I mean, it's representative of many, many ships around the turn of the, 2 centuries ago now, I guess, right? 1800s to 1900s. And these ships were built to go long distance, carry a lot of cargo, and do a lot of different types of tasks, right? Well, they didn't do a very good job of one thing, and that was keeping icebergs from ripping a hole in their hull, and then leaking all the seawater throughout the entire ship. And we know that's why a lot of them sank, the most famous of which was probably the Titanic. But today's more modern ships are built with a different type of infrastructure, right, or architecture, right? They have, let's call it micro-segmented or encapsulated cores within their hull to stop the easy, travel of water between the front and the back of the ship, right? So what that buys us, and notice from this slide, that's number 31. It's the same ship. This ship took a direct hit on the port side, blew a big hole in the middle of that ship, but it didn't leak to the front or the back. Now the ship list to the left a little bit here is laying on its side, but notice all the crew, they're up on top, they're not worried about anything, they know the ship's not going to sink. That's a very good example or representation of what it means in our networks to perform micro-segmentation. And what does it equal? It equals survival, right? Because it is going to keep the bad guys containerized or keep a misconfigured machine on the network that it's assigned to, and so that it can't cross-pollinate that bad traffic or that malware, okay? So the key takeaway here is that we have to be able to perform this segmentation across the entire enterprise on all connected assets. That's IoT, OT, managed and unmanaged. What we mean by that is we like to be able to talk to your Windows, Mac, and Linux machines agentlessly, identify what's going on that machine, what users logged into it, what applications are installed, services are running, etc. That would be a managed machine. Unmanaged would be BYOD, or it would be a contractor machine, or some device that we can't manage. We may not trust it the way that we do one of these managed machines. We're able to tie into multiple types of tools, right? Not the least of which would be your network infrastructure, right? So at our core, Forescout came from a NAC background, network access control. So we talked to all of your switch vendors, support most of the features for all of them for doing control actions. That would include VLANs, ACLs, take it up a step or centralize it, as it were, your next-gen firewalls. We can feed device context and user context to a Palo Alto NGFW, for instance, and then that firewall can apply a policy based on what type of device it is and who's logged into it. That also extends to different agents that we can enforce, as well as native SDN tie-ins in the cloud. This, again, I'm going to say it, another time. This is probably the 5th or 6th time. I want to make sure we're clear on this across all of the different networks in your enterprise, right? Campus, data center, cloud, IoT, and OT networks. All right, so to kind of bring all those concepts home a little bit on this slide, at our base here, again, at our enforcement layer, that's our partner ecosystem. We talk to all the switches and wireless LAN controllers on the market. You see those at the kind of the center part of this partner ecosystem line. Then that extends out to your cloud infrastructure providers, and then to the right side to your firewalls primarily, right? So those are typically going to be more centrally deployed, or they may be at remote sites, and we can enforce at those sites, again, across all of your network types. So that provides us the ability to enforce across the entire infrastructure. At the next layer up, right, in between where we sit with building our policies, is going to be, and the enforcement layer would be our control orchestration layer, right? So that's where we build our policies for control, as you'll see in a second, where we can design and simulate our segmentation policies with iSegment. Really cool project that we've had going there for a couple of years, and that product's been out for almost a year now, iSegment. It gives us the ability to design segmentation policies, simulate how they're going to impact the network, and before we actually implement them, right? And then overall, again, we can monitor and respond much more quickly. So then here's a glimpse of what iSegment looks like. So it basically ties together our different zones within a network. So you may have, and I apologize, it's a little blurry in that slide, but the grid on the left side, or the matrix, would be the different zones across the top of device types, and then the networks that they talk to on the left side, right? So those intersections is where we would see traffic. So it gives us the ability to know the traffic that's there, visualize the traffic flows. We can then build policies to simulate what impact we would have on an environment in the case that we wanted to restrict VPN users' access to a certain range of IPs in the data center, for instance, right? So we could build and simulate that policy before we then actually implement it and start blocking the traffic, or blocking the users or the devices from accessing that data, okay? So again, in the long run or overall, the concept there is to be able to monitor continuously, automate responses, and respond in a very, very rapid fashion to any sort of events that may come up on the network. All right, so it leads us to our third and final poll question. And do we have any other questions, Eileen, before we get into this question?
We do indeed. We had another question come in. Are there any predictive assists for the policies that could be set?
Are there any predictive assists for the policies that could be set? I'm going to try to translate what that question means. We do provide professional services to build policies for you in the deployment phase of a project or ongoing. We provide architecture assistance as well as guys like me in the field, systems engineers. We're available to help build policies as well. Also, not to leave this out, but training is key. So we do have training classes. We do also have a kind of a user portal, customer portal, where you can share ideas with other users of the platform, so you can help enhance your policy building. So hopefully that addressed that question. All right, so poll question number 3, what are the benefits of Forescout's iSegment product? All right, so we just talked about that one. How about, is it to accelerate network segmentation projects with confidence? Is it to reduce risk of business disruption? To adapt to compliance and regulatory requirements, or what about all of the above? So we'll give you a second to answer those, and we'll get the results. If I didn't accurately or adequately answer that last question too, we can always take an email from you or set up a call to kind of dig into the details of that question at another time. All right. Waiting on those responses. All right, looks like the results are coming back. And all right, so somehow or other, the all of the above didn't make it onto the list. So that might have made it a little challenging, guys. Yeah, so the correct answer was all of the above. So if you answered any of those, I would give you full credit for it, just because of the polling question didn't come through. But yeah, it's all of the above, right? So iSegment is going to give you the ability to accelerate your segmentation projects. Again, it's just a bolt-on, let's call it. It's a module that would install in your Forescout platform. that's going to run on top of the eyesight module. Eyesight's going to give us that ability to see everything and build policies to identify what they are. So see, classify, or discover and classify. And then with iSegment, we can very rapidly see, okay, well, who's talking to who? And then let's build some policies that will restrict that access. What is that going to do? That's going to reduce the risk of business disruption, because if your VPN users are able, if somebody on the VPN is able to download that client on a non-corporate owned asset, for instance, and then they get into the server farm or into the cloud or wherever because they have a VPN connection, and then their machine is compromised with some malware and it spreads, right? That would increase a business disruption. We give you the ability to reduce that by blocking it. Also, being able to enforce or adapt to compliance and regulatory requirements, so we can enforce any of those regulatory compliance policies that you have, right? That could include something simple like, hey, we want to make sure AV is up and running and up to date and our OS badges are in place. Or it could be something a little more complicated with like the NIST standards or any number of the other compliance sort of frameworks. We can actually ingest most of those through a couple of different formats and then enforce. I want to say NIST is something like 178 different checks that we would run against a Windows machine. So we have the ability to, again, as I stated in one of those slides, be as granular as you need to be. Okay, so a good job on that. Sorry for the confusion on the responses. So that was all the above. All right, so to kind of wrap this up here, guys, the zero trust principles, we've hit all of those key tenets, and we all know complete visibility is key. It's very well something that you all struggle with daily, is knowing exactly what's on the network and where is it, right? That's one of the greatest things I've loved about working with Forescout and being an engineer and going out and doing evals, is asking the engineers that I work with, hey, how many devices do you think we're going to see in these segments we're going to set up? And they may say, I don't know, 2,000. And then when we set up all the segments, all the IP ranges, and we come back with 2,500, there's another 500 devices they had no idea were out there. Oh, well, let's look at them. What are they? Well, there's a lot of Windows systems typically, but wait a second, there's a Windows XP or a handful of Windows XP that they didn't know about. So that complete visibility is the key that gets the whole process started here, right? And then also tying in much more than just the device or the user. We tie the two together. We know what the user is doing on the device at any point in time. And then also that gives us the ability to build that segmentation, which is, in essence, all the zero trust principles are. A big component of that is to be able to enforce segmentation, right? We may have VLANs everywhere, and we may know that we have a written policy that says if it's a printer, it goes on this VLAN, or if it's a Windows system or an HR Windows system, it goes on this VLAN, but we may not have the ability to enforce that. Well, with Forescout, we can do that. All right, so here's a couple of just finishing slides for you. Again, you'll get these slides in a PDF form, but you'll be able to go to these links, do a little more research if you're inclined to. There's a really good Forrester paper here on the extended ecosystem, the ZTX, or Zero Trust Extended Ecosystem. You see the link. That one's really cool because it gives you kind of a roadmap with key takeaways and so forth of how to get to zero trust. And Forrester's a big fan of ours. I mean, they've done work for us in the past, and we've helped them out as well. We've collaborated. And there's also a webinar, you see the link on the right side here, that's all around the same topic, right, which really goes into some more detail about IoT and OT, right? In the time that we had allotted today, we tried to keep this fairly high level, stay out of the weeds on the OT side especially. We get really deep on OT. We've done OT for a number of years with our core product, with iSight and iControl, but we've also, in the last couple of years, we acquired another company, Security Matters. Those guys do nothing but OT, right? So if you do have operational technology environments, manufacturing environments, you want to take a closer look at that one. And then last but not least, really here from a technical standpoint, we do have another opportunity for you to do a test drive. We call them our Test Drive Tuesdays. You can go to this link here and register, the forescout.com/company/events. Where we go into our latest version, that's 8.2 of the Forescout platform, which includes iSegment. We do some focus on healthcare, so if you happen to be in the healthcare vertical, that would be of particular interest to you. And then also OT, right? So the Silent Defense product from our Security Matters brethren, our acquisition that we made. We go into some detail there in one of these test drives. So with all that said, guys, any other questions? We can open up the floor here. If you want to drop some in via the Q&A, we'll do our best to answer those while we're on the webinar.
And Dan, did you have any questions come in from your side possibly by chance? And while we wait just to see if anyone does have a question, just to touch on the test drives again, just to reiterate, that is an actual hands-on experience. So you get a login to the system and you go through 4 different use cases from all aspects of the Forescout platform, including the segmentation portion of iSegment. So it's a real hands-on experience, 90 minutes, and the entire time you're driving the system. So it's a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, really good point on that, Eileen. And we've been doing those test drives for a couple of years now. And of course, we started out doing them hands-on in person, and we've evolved that to a virtual experience. But it is hands-on, about 90 minutes. You actually are taken through several different laps, as we call them, right? And where you build policy and we test them and we tie the policies together. So yeah, it's if you're a hands-on person, if you're an engineer that works on these types of products, it'll be very, very beneficial for you to kind of get an idea of how the Forescout platform works. I don't see any other questions, Eileen. Do you?
I do not. I think it's probably safe. We can close out the webinar. We will be sending to everyone a recording of this webinar in addition to a PDF of the slides. You will also receive an electronic gift card to Favor, if that was your choice, so that you can support some of the local restaurants with, as we're still in the quarantining of the pandemic. So please do enjoy and support some local restaurants. Or, of course, if you elected instead to have us make a donation to Feed America, we will be doing that on your behalf as well. Really appreciate your time today. We hope to see you in a test drive here coming up in the next few weeks. And let us know if you have any additional questions. Ted, thank you for your time. Dan, and to the Set Solutions team, thank you for the opportunity as well.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Be safe.